All right, welcome to Fantasy Files 1054 or FFX54 for short. We had a big day in the fantasy football world. A lot of movements. We had, this is going to be the bye-apocalypse for week 9. A lot of implications with the wide receiver position, as I guess as well as the running back position as well. But the big news is that today was the trade deadline about an hour ago at 4 p.m. Eastern time on November 1st. And we had a lot of moves that have some fantasy implications. We had TJ Hockenson going to the Minnesota Vikings to replace Irv Smith Jr. We had Chase Claypool going to the Chicago Bears. We had Chase Edmonds going to the Denver Broncos. We had Calvin Ridley, which doesn't affect this year, but we had him going to the Jags to potentially replace Marvin Jones next year. Jeff Wilson of the Dolphins, as well as Bradley Chubb. And then we had Nyheim Hines going to the Buffalo Bills. So there's going to be a lot to get into, and there's going to be some names on this list that we're not used to seeing because of a combination of these buys and of the massive trade deadline that we just had. So we're going to get right into the wide receiver ranking video first this week because I think there was more moves that affected this position, and we're just testing it out. So let's go ahead and hop right over to the content and get right into it with our first overall on the week, which is going to be Justin Jefferson at the Washington Commanders. You see down here that the Washington Commanders are allowing 30.3 fantasy points per game to this position. Oh, that's not going to work out. Hold on. So it's actually a very good matchup for Justin Jefferson. TJ Hockenson coming to the Minnesota Vikings, I think affects Adam Thielen more than it does Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is still going to be your big play stretcher. I think he still gets 100 yards a game just like you've been seeing. So if you're a Justin Jefferson owner, take a breath. It'll be okay. I don't think that affects him as much. If you're an Adam Thielen owner, then you might have a little bit more to be worried about here. Because I think TJ Hockenson is going to be the new red zone target, or at least split red zone targets with Adam Thielen. So take a breath if you're a Justin Jefferson owner, and he's going to be our number one of the week with a good matchup. Right behind Justin Jefferson, we have Stefon Diggs going up against Sauce Gardner and the New York Jets, which is a little bit interesting here. I'm curious to see how Sauce Gardner does against an elite receiver in Stefon Diggs. But regardless of the matchup, Stefon Diggs is going to be that bona fide stud receiver that I'm willing to put, matchup free as a top 3 position every single week. So Stefon Diggs, without much being said, is going to be our number 2. And Nyheim Hines coming in. I know, you might want me to touch on that a little bit. I don't think that has any effect on Stefon Diggs or Gabe Davis for that matter. I think it's going to obviously have more to do with Devin Singletary. And James Cook is completely irrelevant at this point because they wouldn't have went out to get James Cook they wouldn't have went out to get Nyheim Hines if they were happy with James Cook. So regardless, Stefon Diggs is going to be our number 2. Right behind Stefon Diggs, we have Tyreek Hill versus the Chicago Bears in a very tough matchup. But what you got to remember here is that these rankings or these numbers are just from previous weeks. And we just saw the Bears get rid of Raekwon Smith. And they also got rid of Robert Quinn, I believe is his name. I know I should know that name, but regardless, their defense is weakening. Even though it's not coverage players that they're getting rid of on the defensive side of the ball, I think it still affects their overall performance because if you can't stop the run, then you can't stop the pass. So Chicago Bears taking on Tyreek Hill in a very tough matchup for the Chicago Bears. Tyreek Hill is in a great spot this week to succeed, as he is pretty much every single week. We continue to see him and the entire Dolphins team perform on a week-to-week basis. So Tyreek Hill is going to be our number 3. Right behind Tyreek Hill, we have Cooper Kupp. I know some of you are a little bit surprised, I'm sure, to see Cooper Kupp as our number 4 and not a little bit higher, but this is just because of the ankle injury that he suffered at one of the last plays in the final minute of the game last week. So we're not too sure of his status quite yet. I think he is going to play, but we're just not sure of his health and how he is sitting on that front. So we're going to bump Cooper Kupp down just a little bit going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are not as stout of a defense as they once were, allowing 26 fantasy points to the position. So Cooper Kupp gets a bump down based off of the injury. But again, these rankings are subject to change as we get injury updates throughout the week. We are recording this on November 1st, which is going to be a Tuesday. So not a whole lot of information quite yet, but regardless, Cooper Kupp is going to be a must play as long as he is playing. So Cooper Kupp as the number 4. Right behind Cooper Kupp, we have DeAndre Hopkins in a surprisingly difficult matchup. And I say surprisingly, not because it's new to this week, but I'm still shocked that the Seattle Seahawks are putting up these defensive performances every single week. So especially against the passing game. So DeAndre Hopkins, on the other side of the token, DeAndre Hopkins has been putting up incredible performances since he's come back for the last 2 weeks, and I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon. So regardless of the matchup, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a matchup-proof, bona fide number one receiver in a team that's running tons of plays per game, so he will have that volume. DeAndre Hopkins as our number 5. Right behind DeAndre Hopkins, we have Devante Adams coming off a very weak performance last week, only giving us like 1.2 fantasy points, I believe, in a full PPR league. However, I think this had a lot to do with his sickness. I think he had the flu leading into this game. So, I mean, if you could imagine the last time you were really sick, having to kind of button up and playing a full contact sport 2 days after you get over the sickness, I'm sure a little bit of it was still lingering at that point. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass. And honestly, this entire Las Vegas Raiders defense just looked absolutely atrocious last week. So I'm looking for them to have a get-right game. And I think Devante Adams is going to be a beneficiary of the better game that the Raiders should put together here in this upcoming Week 9, with the Jacksonville Jaguars allowing 27.3 fantasy points per game to this position, which is right in the middle of the pack. So Devante Adams should be fine as our number 6 receiver going into Week 9. Right behind Devante Adams, we have A.J. Brown on Thursday Night Football against the Houston Texans, only allowing 22 points per game. And the reason this is a little bit concerning for A.J. Brown, and honestly the entire passing game of the Philadelphia Eagles, is I think they just get steamrolled. They don't have to do much passing. I know A.J. Brown's coming off of a massive performance. However, I don't think the Texans keep up with them to any regard, because honestly, no team has been able to keep up with the Eagles this year. So we see a massive explosion in the first half, and then it kind of dies off in the second, which I think is what's going to happen again, especially against the Houston Texans this week. So look for A.J. Brown to come down off of the high that he had with his 40-point performance last week, and have a little bit more pedestrian performance as our number 7 ranked receiver on Week 9. Right behind A.J. Brown, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I have bumped him up a little bit this week. He's one more week removed from his concussion / not concussion. I don't know what last week was. It was a protocol thing. He had a quieter week last week, but still plenty of volume. And now with TJ Hockenson gone, there's more targets to go around this offense. DeAndre Swift is going to continue to get better and better, which will give this offense a lot more opportunities in the red zone. Also coming off of his injury. So Amon-Ra with no TJ Hockenson in this offense will allow him to have more targets in the red zone. So I think he's in a great spot to succeed this week as well as the rest of the season. So if you can go and trade for Amon-Ra St. Brown right now, it's honestly probably a great time to do that, coming off of his injuries, concussions, and a slower start to his to getting back to play. I think that Amon-Ra is going to have a very good week this week, and is someone you should be targeting on the trade market. This is kind of a PSA, but a lot of redraft league trade deadlines are going to be November 30th at 12 p.m. So just keep that in mind as well moving forward. Right behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, we have Jaylen Waddle, also in a more difficult matchup in the Chicago Bears. But again, this offense has been humming. They have another piece. I think Jeff Wilson is a far better back than Chase Edmonds. And really any piece of this offense that can increase productivity helps all of these players, especially going up against a Chicago Bears defense, as well as their offense, who has been able to figure it out to a certain degree. So the Chicago Bears should offensively be able to keep up with the Dolphins, more so than they were able to in the beginning of the season. So I think that this bodes well for both Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So Jaylen Waddle is going to be our number 9 on the week. Right behind Jaylen Waddle, we have Mike Evans going up against Jalen Ramsey and the Los Angeles Rams. Kind of in the middle to lower end of the pack, which is so surprising that this Rams defense has been so bad. I mean, if you think about the pieces that they have, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, Bobby Wagner, the list goes on, and the fact that they are middle of the pack at best in the passing game is pretty shocking. But nonetheless, Mike Evans is going to go in and have a pretty decent game against the Rams, who are allowing 27.6 fantasy points per game to the position. So look for Mike Evans to continue his hot streak and give us another productive week in fantasy football. Right behind Mike Evans is going to be Keenan Allen. I'm really bumping Keenan Allen up this week, and honestly, I would love to bump him up further. It's just that injury that's lingering in the background. He should be good coming off of a bye week, rested up, with Mike Williams going to be out again with his high ankle sprain, I believe is what they ended up diagnosing his injury as. So as long as Keenan Allen plays, he's going up against the best matchup in the entire league in the Atlanta Falcons, allowing 38.6 fantasy points to the wide receiver position, and they have one less wide receiver who was kind of their 1B receiver in Mike Williams. So Keenan Allen, if healthy, is in a very, very good spot to come off of his injury and start hot. I think Austin Eckler gets a bump this week, but I think Keenan Allen is going to be the biggest beneficiary of the entire situation as far as the matchup and Mike Williams' injury goes. So Keenan Allen, look for him to come back hot against the Atlanta Falcons as our number 11 receiver. But I would not be surprised if he finishes the week higher than this. Right behind Keenan Allen is Chris Godwin, who has just been dying for his breakout game ever since returning from his hamstring injury. He's been getting 10-plus targets almost every single game since he's come back, and it's just a matter of time until he starts capitalizing on that volume in the end zone and getting bigger plays week by week. So I think Chris Godwin is a great buy low candidate moving forward rest of season. So if you can target Keenan Allen, honestly, Keenan Allen or Chris Godwin for this point, I think they're very similar players in short passes, high volume. So if they can get into the end zone along with their 10-plus target games on a week-to-week basis, these guys are going to start to blow up. So look to go get them if you can. They're coming off of those injuries. But for now, Chris Godwin's going to be our number 12 on the week. Right behind Chris Godwin is T. Higgins, who is very difficult to rank right now. I mean, the caveat here is that Ja'Marr Chase obviously is injured with that pelvis injury. Now, we saw him last night in a Monday night game against the Cleveland Browns, who have had the Cincinnati Bengals number for whatever reason. It's kind of one of those rivalry things where things just kind of shake out differently just based off of the rivalry and not necessarily off the matchup. So I don't know how much weight we want to put into T. Higgins underproducing last week. Even though he did give us a touchdown, it was off of like 3 targets, so nothing very comforting. And one thing I will say that you have to think about is with Ja'Marr Chase being gone, yes, T. Higgins is very productive when Ja'Marr Chase is there, and T. Higgins is going up against the cornerback too. But we got to make sure that T. Higgins can still produce against the cornerback 1 with Ja'Marr Chase gone. So I do think he can, and I still think he's a very valuable fantasy asset, and you're starting him regardless of the situation. But it's something that we want to temper expectations for, especially until we see it proven on the field. I know there's past evidence, but this is a new year, new team, so let's just see what T. Higgins does this week. We're still starting him, but we're tempering expectations just a little bit based off of the horrible performance we saw last night against the Cleveland Browns. Right behind T. Higgins, we saw DK Metcalf, who miraculously came off of what looked to be a multi-week injury. He got carted off the field. We thought he was going to be out with a knee injury for multiple weeks. He comes back last week when we thought he probably shouldn't have even played. And he gets 10 targets, 55 yards, a touchdown, and 17.5 full PPR fantasy points on the week. So regardless of what we thought that injury might be, we learned that DK Metcalf is a freak of nature. He wasn't affected by it really whatsoever. And even if he was affected by it, that is why he's in a better spot this week to succeed over last. And last week he had 17.5 points. So he's going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who are an upper to middle matchup, allowing 26.1 fantasy points to the wide receiver position. But regardless, the Seattle Seahawks offense is continuing to buzz, and DK Metcalf is going to be one more week removed from this injury. So we're looking for DK Metcalf to be our number 14 on the week. Right behind DK Metcalf, we have Chris Olave, who is also coming off of a very slow performance relative to what we're used to seeing from this rookie. Now, I will say, going up against the Baltimore Ravens, he's in a very good matchup when they're allowing 32.5 fantasy points to the wide receiver position. We don't know if Michael Thomas is going to be back. We don't know if Jarvis Landry is going to be back at the current time of this recording. But what we do know is that Alvin Kamara had a massive week last week in the receiving game, which took a lot away from Chris Olave. So even though I do believe that Alvin Kamara is going to continue to succeed in this offense for the rest of the season. I don't think it's going to be at that degree. I think he had like almost 100 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns or something crazy. So I don't think he's going to produce on that level every single week. And Chris Olave should settle back into that role that we've seen pretty much every other week up until last. So look for Chris Olave to have a bounce back going up against a very good matchup in my Baltimore Ravens. And he should be back to what we're used to seeing. So Chris Olave is going to be our number 15. Right behind Chris Olave, we have Tyler Lockett, who just continues to be Tyler Lockett, giving us pretty much 15 fantasy points on a week-to-week basis, going up against the Arizona Cardinals. We looked over that matchup already with DK Metcalf, but he's kind of this middle-of-the-pack wide receiver in our top 30 rankings every single week because he's going to get the targets. He's going to get the deep shot. So you're looking for a very high ceiling every single week. Lower floor, maybe 10 points as his floor, maybe like 8 or 9 if he has a really bad game. But Tyler Lockett's going to be a solid option you want to throw in every single week. And even though DK Metcalf had a very good week last week for, all things considered, and he's going to be one more week removed from that injury next week, he still is going to have that lingering injury. And Tyler Lockett is going to continue to take those deep shots, maybe more so, slightly more so than we're used to seeing from DK. So Tyler Lockett's going to be in a really good position as our number 16 receiver on the week for week 9. Right behind Tyler Lockett is DJ Moore, which is surprising, especially with how this season started for DJ Moore and this Carolina offense. But what we can't deny is the past 2 weeks when Christian McCaffrey hasn't been there. But the more important part of the story is PJ Walker as the starter. There's just been more opportunities for DJ Moore, and he has been capitalizing on them. And this Carolina offense, it's a bunch of misfits in a lot of different, in a lot of different ways. And I think they're kind of on this prove it archetype where they're just hungry, they're probably pissed off, and they're trying to prove to everyone why they belong. So Deontay Foreman is continuing to pop off, and DJ Moore is continuing to pop off. So even though they're coming off of a very easy matchup in the Atlanta Falcons last week, you still can't deny the opportunities that PJ Walker is giving DJ Moore. And until proven otherwise with PJ Walker at quarterback, I'm going to continue to rank DJ Moore higher and higher as he produces on a week-to-week basis. It's kind of a restart. When you open up his stats and you look through them, you have to restart it when PJ Walker becomes a quarterback because it's a different situation completely. So DJ Moore against a pretty difficult matchup in the Cincinnati Bengals, allowing 25 fantasy points per game to the position. But DJ Moore's pretty much the only receiver on this offense that we can count on. So DJ Moore will be our number 17. Right behind DJ Moore is Gabe Davis, a feast or famine player, and we continue to see that. Low target, high volatility. So he has access to an astronomical, what's astronomical? An astronomical ceiling and a very low floor, which we saw last week. But before that, we saw 2 weeks where he had hit that ceiling. So regardless of those low floor games, I've heard him described as a kind of a Mike Williams type player, which I think is a great comp. In the fact that he's just very volatile and you have to throw him in your lineups because you don't want to see 30 points off of 3 receptions and 2 touchdowns on your bench. So Gabe Davis is going to be our number 18 on the week. Right behind Gabe Davis is Terry McLaurin, and they're very similar in a lot of ways in that feast or famine regard, especially with Taylor Heineke as the quarterback. They're going up against the Minnesota Vikings, which are going to be a very good matchup for the passing game and the receiver specifically, allowing 30.9 fantasy points to this position at home for the Commanders. So look for Terry McLaurin to have another good week with Taylor Heineke at quarterback, because regardless of Taylor Heineke and how good of a quarterback he is to a real-life perspective and how he is for the team itself, he's looking good for Terry McLaurin's fantasy production because he's willing to air it out and let Terry McLaurin go up and grab it. So regardless of what you may think about Taylor Heineke, he's giving Terry McLaurin all of those opportunities. So in that regard, we have Terry McLaurin as our number 19 on the week. Right behind Terry McLaurin, we have Michael Pittman, which is, I'm sure it hurts to see. Actually, I know it hurts to see as a Michael Pittman owner because I am a Michael Pittman owner. But with Sam Ehlinger as the quarterback in Indianapolis, I can't rank Michael Pittman any higher than this. We thought that there might be a larger a lot more air yards with a younger quarterback where Matt Ryan wasn't airing it out on a week-to-week basis. We thought that maybe if this younger quarterback comes in, he might start throwing the ball and taking those chances down the field, but that's not what we saw. And when we did see it, it was to Alec Pierce, not Michael Pittman Jr. So off of a pretty pedestrian first week with this new quarterback, until we're proven otherwise to see that this guy can actually result in good wide receiver, support wide receiver fantasy production, I'm going to have to rank Michael Pittman Jr. as our number 20th and below until we see that proven otherwise. Nyheim Hines is out of the offense, but I don't think that has really too many implications for Michael Pittman Jr. So regardless of everything else with Sam Ehlinger at quarterback, we're going to have Michael Pittman Jr. as our number 20 on the week. Right behind Michael Pittman Jr., we have Jakobi Meyers, who goes in and gives us 10 targets every single game and at least 10 points. So what we were describing as the watered-down version of Deontay Johnson coming into this season, now it's looking more like Deontay Johnson is the watered-down version of Jakobi Meyers in the fact that they are just high volume, high target, short yardage possession receivers that just get the ball and give you a decent baseline. And I say they, but I should be careful with that because Deontay Johnson has been getting the targets, but not been producing on a fantasy level. On the flip side of that, though, Jakobi Meyers has been a very solid wide receiver and will continue to be so moving forward. We saw with Mac Jones coming back, that target share increased to what we were used to seeing with Mac Jones at quarterback, with that we weren't necessarily seeing with Bailey Zappi. So Jakobi Meyers is continuing to rise up my rankings week in and week out. And as he continues to get these high volume, highly productive fantasy outputs, we're going to keep bumping him up until he settles into a decent area. So Jakobi Meyers going up against a very, very difficult matchup in the Indianapolis Colts, only allowing 19.7 fantasy points per game to the position. That's something that we're a little bit more worried about this week. And if it wasn't such a difficult matchup, we probably would have him ranked even higher. So Jakobi Meyers, you're throwing into your lineup very confidently and not thinking too much about it. Jakobi Meyers is at 21. Right behind Jakobi Meyers, we have Christian Kirk, who is... he's getting difficult to rank. He will come in one week, have 10 targets, a touchdown, look like that red zone target that we're looking for, and then the next week he gets pretty much nothing, and Travis Etienne takes over. But regardless, he is the wide receiver one in a young, developing Jacksonville Jaguars offense. So regardless of what we're seeing week in and week out, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, allowing 27.4 fantasy points per game, we're going to have to put Christian Kirk in this area with Jakobi Meyers at 22. And he has access to a very high ceiling, but sometimes we see him die on a week-to-week basis, not give us too much production. So, when we're putting these ranking videos together, it's a kind of a balance between volatility and the access of the ceiling that the player has versus reliability. So that's something you try to balance because you have players like Jakobi Meyers who don't necessarily have that high ceiling that they have access to. However, they're giving you consistent output on a week-to-week basis. So you're comparing those guys to players like Gabe Davis and Terry McLaurin, who are a lot more volatile. So it's a balancing act. And honestly, Christian Kirk is kind of giving us different roles every single week. Sometimes he is that high ceiling guy, and sometimes he is kind of just that volume guy. So we're going to continue to monitor Christian Kirk's productivity throughout the year. One thing I do want to note while we're on the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receivers, we did see Calvin Ridley get traded over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We mentioned it in the beginning of this episode, but very exciting move for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Has no implication on this year because Calvin Ridley is suspended throughout the entirety of this year indefinitely, which means he might even have suspension get extended into next year. But it's just something to monitor because I think what happens is Marvin Jones ends up falling off since he is that older wide receiver, and we see Calvin Ridley step into that alpha receiver for this team, and then Christian Kirk kind of slide over into the role that he had in Arizona as a deep threat. So something that's a little bit interesting for the future and something to think about. But for this year, we're going to have Christian Kirk still as that wide receiver one on the blossoming Jaguars young offense as our number 22 on the week. Right behind Christian Kirk, with the assumption that he is healthy going into next week in a very good matchup, we have Allen Lazard going up against the Detroit Lions, who are allowing 32.4 fantasy points per game, but I will say this Green Bay offense is so messy. It's so hard to be confident in any of these players, especially with this injury lingering for Allen Lazard at this point. We saw Romeo Doubs go in there and make some spectacular catches that he really needed after the hard, honestly horrible game that he had last week. Not last week, but I guess the previous week. But that was in the absence of Allen Lazard. So if Allen Lazard is healthy going up in what should be a high-scoring game, we should see Allen Lazard with a good amount of targets and a good amount of red zone opportunities. So Allen Lazard is going to be our number 23 on the week. Right behind Allen Lazard, we have DeVonta Smith against the Houston Texans. I think DeVonta Smith deserves to be ranked a lot higher than we have him right now. However, you got to remember what I said, especially or also with A.J. Brown. It's against the Houston Texans, so I think that the lead gets kind of out of hand quick. And the number 2 option on a rush first offense, typically in a matchup that should be a blowout pretty quick by halftime, I think that DeVonta Smith for this week will get knocked down quite a bit, coming off of a very slow performance last week that kind of just got monopolized by A.J. Brown. So DeVonta Smith just for this week is going to be our number 24. And honestly, I would consider benching him if you have someone on the bench that you feel is a little bit more solid of a 10-point baseline. However, I will say it's going to be difficult with this bipocalypse. So DeVonta Smith, nonetheless, is going to be our 24 on the week. Right behind DeVonta Smith, we have JuJu Smith-Schuster in a very good matchup going up against the Tennessee Titans, allowing 32.6 fantasy points per game to the position. We do have Kadarius Toney coming over to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think that Kadarius Toney is going to be the number 1 receiver in this Kansas City offense by far. I know that might be a hot take right now, especially with not seeing anything from the Kansas City Chiefs offense, from Andy Reid, how they plan to utilize him, but just looking off of the eye test and my gut, Kadarius Toney looks like the best receiver that they have access to on this offense, and Patrick Mahomes will find that ceiling for that player. But I don't think that's this week. I think that JuJu Smith is going to be the lead receiver on the Kansas City Chiefs this week. Kadarius Toney's still getting up to speed. They're going to figure him out a little bit later down the road for this playoff run that they should have a shot at. But at this current moment of time, going up against a very good matchup in the Tennessee Titans, we're going to have JuJu Smith-Schuster as our number 25 on week 9. Right behind JuJu Smith-Schuster, we have Tyler Boyd versus the Carolina Panthers, which are looking like they're going to be a very good matchup. We saw a lot of production in the receiving game against the against the Carolina Panthers last week with Marcus Mariota throwing the ball. So that should tell you a little bit about the access to a ceiling that they have, and they being the Cincinnati Bengals wide receivers this week. But we saw a slow performance for Tyler Boyd in the entire offense. So again, that was our first look. The Monday night game was our first look at the Jamar Chase-less Cincinnati Bengals passing game, and it looked very ugly. But I will say, I don't think that's how every game goes. Joe Burrow's like 0-4 against the Cleveland Browns in his career. So again, they have his number. So look for the entire Bengals offense to have a bounce back, especially up against a very good matchup in the Carolina Panthers. So temper expectations just a little bit from what you saw on Monday night. However, Tyler Boyd being the number 2 receiver on this Bengals offense is in a very good spot to get a lot of volume, especially more so than usual. So Tyler Boyd's going to be our number 26 on the week. Right behind Tyler Boyd is Romeo Doubs for all the reasons we mentioned with Allen Lazard. He made some good catches. He earned a little bit of trust back that he lost 2 weeks ago with all those drops. But again, this Green Bay Packers offense is very scary on a week-to-week basis. I don't think they found their identity. One thing we do know is Christian Watson did suffer that concussion pretty much right away last week. So it is, and on top of Christian Watson having that concussion, again, the trade deadline is passed. They didn't trade for DJ Moore. They didn't trade for Brandin Cooks. They didn't do anything, which is honestly very surprising to me. I don't know what they're doing. They're kind of just throwing the entire season away. I don't think the Green Bay Packers are going to be contenders at all with the roster that they have currently. Aaron Rodgers could prove me wrong, but in the meantime, if Allen Lazard is healthy, we're going to have Romeo Doubs as 27. If Allen Lazard is not healthy, we'll probably just put Romeo Doubs where you see Allen Lazard currently. So it's going to be a great matchup in the fact that this should be a high-scoring game, but it feels like catching lightning in a bottle with this Green Bay Packers offense because it could be Sammy Watkins, it could be Robert Tonyan, it could be Romeo Doubs, it could be Aaron Jones, heck, it could be A.J. Dillon. So it's hard to put a finger on what week is going to be whose week, but with the opportunity in the matchup, we're going to have Romeo Doubs as 27. And I think that was a roundabout way of saying I don't think Romeo Doubs is a must start, even with Lazard missing the week. So I know that might be a little bit of a hot take, especially with the week that Romeo Doubs just had, but I don't think he's a must start. And speaking of non-must starts, we have Brandin Cooks, who I'm sure is absolutely thrilled to still be in Houston. I'm sure he didn't want to go to the Los Angeles Rams or Green Bay at all. Sarcasm. Brandin Cooks is just dying in the Houston Texans offense, and we've continued to see it week in and week out. Usually he's a receiver that goes out and gives us 1,000 yards every single year, but it's been quite a horrible start for Brandin Cooks. And I don't see this really changing to any degree in the near future. If I read you his fantasy points for the past, we'll just do all 7 weeks that he's played. It's been 11.3, 8.6, 6, 1 spike week in 18.7, and then 14.2, 9.4, 15.2. So nothing to really get excited about. And these are off of pretty decent volume, anywhere from 5 targets to 12. So until we see the volume take a massive spike on those 5 to 6 target games, especially going up against the Philadelphia Eagles on prime time, who are a very good defense, only allowing 24 fantasy points per game to the position. Brandin Cooks is going to have to be our number 28 on the week. Right behind Brandin Cooks, we have Rondale Moore coming off of a massive week. And again, same thing I said with DeAndre Hopkins, and I've said in weeks past, Arizona Cardinals run I think it might be the most plays in the entire league, that equates to volume. And when you're in a full PPR league, even if you do absolutely nothing with the receptions, if you're getting 10 targets and you capitalize on those 10 targets, that's your double-digit fantasy point production on the week. So if he's going to continue to get the volume as well as getting these red zone targets and kind of playing as that wide receiver 2 or 2B, if you want to count Zach Ertz, with Marquise Brown being out, Rondale Moore is going to continue to be a fantasy option that you can throw into your lineup confidently, especially in a week where we have a lot of players off of bye. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, which we'll talk about next week, and how Chase Claypool has affected George Pickens specifically and his stock. But for this week, you have a lot of those receivers out, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, etc. So, with all of those players out, Rondale Moore is a very good option that you might be able to grab off your waiver. Probably not, but he also might be someone that you have on your bench, and you can throw him into your lineup in the flex for this week where you may have some players on bye. So Rondale Moore is a very solid option coming off of a very big performance last week. Rondale Moore will be our number 29. And then to round it all out, we have Joshua Palmer as our number 30 on the week going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, couple caveats here. At the time of this recording, we have Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer as questionable for the week. Again, we're recording this video on November 1st, which is a Tuesday, very early on the week, and we haven't really gotten any injury designations. So we'll go through a couple scenarios. If Keenan Allen is playing, Joshua Palmer is going to be ranked where you see him now. Again, in a very good matchup in the Atlanta Falcons, actually the best matchup in the entire league with 38.6 fantasy points per game. So if you do that, if you do a little mental exercise, right? And you say that Keenan Allen is healthy, he comes in, gives you, he's a stud. He gives you 20 points in his first game back. That pretty much allows 18.6 points to go Joshua Palmer's way regardless. I know there's going to be some odd guys, Guyton, maybe, I don't know who else is on their roster, but there's going to be some other points sprinkled around. But if you want to think of it like that, Joshua Palmer has access to a massive ceiling regardless of Keenan Allen playing. But if Keenan Allen is going to miss another week, Joshua Palmer gets bumped up the rankings significantly. Pretty much all the way up to maybe where Chris Olave is if Keenan Allen's going to miss again in this matchup. So that's something to keep an eye on. Now, if both of them miss, which I would be shocked if both of them miss, But if both of them do miss, then Gerald Everett is someone that you want to be throwing into your tight end position and potentially even a flex if you have Travis Kelce and Gerald Everett or something like that, because he will be looking really good on the week. And then obviously Austin Eckler is going to be looking extremely good regardless of the health of these players. But if both of them miss, Austin Eckler might just have 100 fantasy points on the week. So just a couple of scenarios to keep in mind as this week progresses. Again, these rankings are subject to change as news continues to come out. But what we do know, rest of season, the trade deadline has passed. So you know where DJ Moore sits. You know where your Green Bay Packers receivers sit. In future weeks, you know where your Jerry Jeudy's, your Cortland Sutton sit. So at least we know what team everyone's going to be on for the entirety of the season. And in this week where we have a lot of buys that affect the wide receiver position, this is going to be our ranking. So go ahead and down below in the comment section and let us know how you feel about the trades that happened today. Let us know how you feel about these rankings. But most importantly, please go ahead and like the video. It helps me out a lot moving forward with the channel's progression. You guys have been awesome. We've been getting a lot of support in the past weeks. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel and then hit the notification bell so you get notified when we release a wide receiver ranking video, a running back ranking video, and then Sunday, we're starting back up again this Sunday where we go live before kickoff. You can ask any start-sit questions that you may have, but we will be placing some bets. We'll be placing some underdog fantasy drafts and just kind of having a little bit of fun leading up to kickoff. So thanks again for all the support. Good luck, and we'll see you tomorrow for the running back ranking videos. Peace out.